as you know, Mr. President, or as I whispered to you earlier, you've already lost one vote in my household. It's going to the Red Berets, and my 18-year-old. But we have another young person who is 21, waiting to be persuaded. We'll come back to that question, because I'd really wanted to open with that question, but you made some really important points around the economy, and I'd like to possibly just pause there and build out slightly, hopefully not a difficult conversation around the economy. One of the things that I think are important in the economy is this notion of a social compact. And this being a business school, I'm going to speak about one stakeholder in that social compact, being business. My experience is that the sixth administration started off very strongly in terms of a social compact with business. But over time, that has come under challenge. And at the moment, it is mixed. And I hope you would agree that whether we are pursuing policies to have more inclusive economy, whether it's through reducing the unemployment rate, sitting at about 33% or 50 or 70% for the youth, whichever number you choose, or whether it's the laudable objectives of the national health insurance, that none of those are possible if all the social partners aren't engaged. So I'd be interested to know, from your perspective, whether you agree that the social compact between your government and business is currently challenged, and if you do agree, what can we look forward to in the seventh administration to repair that, in order to bring business back as an important partner in these very important, laudable objectives that I'm sure very few will disagree with. The objectives of putting the jobs at the top, the economy at the top, putting youth at the top. But that's only possible if everybody wants to put hands on deck. So are we in trouble with business as the ANC? And if so, what are we going to do about it to make sure that we rebuild that social compact?
I'd like to make a bold statement and say, as South Africans, we are the experts of social compacting. Mm-hmm. As South Africans. And not focusing even on saying government must drive social compacting. Together, we worked to defeat apartheid through social compacting. We amassed ourselves together as the people of this country through various organizations. You might recall when the UDF was formed, when the ANC was still banned. That was one of the most outstanding social compacts that was ever formed in our country. Social compacting also goes back even, and I'll take just the recent time, the 50s, when the Freedom Charter was drafted. That was the social compact. It excluded, obviously, the oppressors, because they could not have been chanting for freedom, because they already had their own freedom. So that was through social compacting. It was not only the ANC that participated in the drafting of the Freedom Charter. So that really was a consolidation of a number of organizations that drafted the most iconic document ever produced in the history of our country. That then became the lodestar to lead us to where we are today. It was social compact. And to defeat the monster of apartheid, it required another social compacting process, which we embarked upon. And I've cited the UDF, and the UDF was an amalgam of many organizations, and of course, led by the African National Congress. The mere drafting of the Constitution itself was another form of social compacting, where we brought diverse groupings, even those that were working with the apartheid government. We brought them together, and business got involved in drafting the constitution. The unions, the religious sector, sporting organizations, NGOs, NPOs, you name it, they all got involved, much as at the table sat the politicos, if you like. But behind everything else was social compacting. You might recall that the drafting of our constitution was like no other in the world, because we consulted extensively and got our people involved in drafting the constitution. They made submissions, and there were millions of submissions that were made. That was social compacting. And with time, we were able to consolidate the social compacting. But then when problems arose in our country, like when state capture crept in, that social compacting cracked. It cracked and fell apart, and we remember how many organizations and many of us responded to the whole ugly specter of state capture. We were against it, and in a way that too was a social compacting of a special kind.
Sure.
Because people were chanting in the street and saying, we want a commission of inquiry, this must stop. And that then eventuated in the setup of the commission, but the remnants of state capture really left many people disaffected in our country. And that compacting that we had set up over years for the development of our country started cracking and weakening. And we must accept that the problems that were inherent at the time really were a challenge to the concept of social compacting. And in the sixth administration, when we started, we realized that we need to bring back the spirit of social compacting. And I remember standing in Parliament talking about various forms of social compacting and saying, for instance, on climate change, I want to set up a body of a diverse number of people to help us with climate change. And I was laughed out of court. They say, no, he should be taking decisions on his own. He's a weak leader, and he hasn't got strength and all that. Why don't you take decisions on your own? And I said, no, that's not my style. When we built the National Union of Mine Workers, it was through social compacting, and the organization I belong to, the African National Congress, firmly believes in social compacting, that we must bring people together, diverse people, and build a consensus. So I started the process then of getting special compacts being put together on a number of things. For instance, on corruption, I said, I want an advisory group on corruption. Help us build a consensus, a compact on corruption. And when COVID hit, I put together diverse groups of people to deal with compacting, with COVID-19, on almost a variety of areas, firmly believing that many minds put together are able to come up with a better solution. I spoke at one of the State of the Nation addresses, and I said I wanted a comprehensive social compact within 100 days. And the problem with that is that I was too much ahead of myself. I was too ambitious. And things had not coalesced to a point where the key social partners could be brought together in a broad, comprehensive social compact. What the situation required was to build special social compacts around specific issues. And it is through these specific areas that we have really made enormous progress. And where even the business sector being brought in, even on a difficult issue like the national minimum wage, I was able to bring them together with unions, with communities, and we arrived at a national minimum wage, an issue that inherently they were opposed to in the beginning. but we built a consensus. And around one of the key challenges we've faced in the last 2 years, which is energy in our country, we felt that we now needed to bring everyone together. And we brought business together, and we set up, led by the presidency, the Presidential Working Group on the Energy Crisis. And we've built a consensus. The improvements that we are seeing now in energy also involve a lot of contributions from the private sector. The logistics problem and challenge that we are facing now has also had to have special attention by building a consensus. And everyone is participating very actively. I've been to eThekwini twice when the business community said, President, we are losing eThekwini as the real crown jewel of tourism in our country. We need to do something with eThekwini, Durban. And I put together a presidential working group on eThekwini as our metro. Brought together business, provincial government, local government, the unions, and everyone. We're now all working, and people can now see the light of day. Now, these are, if you like, sector social compacts. In the 7th administration, we will be able to consolidate all this, to tie it all together into a much more comprehensive one. Because people will have seen that it works to have social compacts. The social compact to bring down apartheid was focused on apartheid. The social compact on even dealing with unrest before 1994. We had a special compact with business, and we formed an entity. I think Nikolai Stavros is here, he will remember, where we put together a compact with business to fight crime. And even now, part of our compacting is about fighting crime, criminality, and corruption. So that is why, Professor, I say we are world's experts. You know, I went to New York a year ago at the UN, on the sidelines of the UN, had a number of American business people, and we explained to them what we do. They said, President, we wish even in our own country we had a similar system like this, where even before a law is passed, we take it to NEDLEC, which is a social compacting legal institution, where we discuss laws and where we try to build consensus. But in the end, there has to be what you call sufficient consensus, even with compacting, because like in families, not everybody agrees on what time to eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Not everybody agrees, on how much money should be given to children as an allowance. But you have sufficient consensus to move forward. When we were drafting the Constitution, we relied on that concept, that we will have compact building, but it will be underpinned by sufficient consensus to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
Because we cannot remain trapped in disagreement forever without moving forward. And that is what we have done. I want to touch on a subject which many people have been really concerned about recently, the National Health Insurance.
Sure.
National Health Insurance.
Maybe before you do, can we see how many medical professionals are in the room? So you can see where they're sitting and you are talking to them.
I'm going to ask them questions.
Excellent.
So I end a long account by saying, I think we are the world's experts in compacting. And I have underpinned, if I may say, my presidency with the concept of social compacting. Those who would like a president who is dictatorial, who is adventurous, who is reckless, will not find that in me.
Sure.
In me, they will find a president who wants to consult. So, and all these processes have often been seen that he is weak. He's not decisive. And I say, I am decisive, but I want to take people along with, because people also have views. They have suggestions to put forward. And that is what I've always sought to embrace. So I'm guilty as charged on that.